Fast forward to last week, the commissioners voted against the recommendation of the Impact Fee Advisory Committee that met twice, that was populated by a member of every city in our county, and also against the local planning authority, which has members on it from every city in the county. And I feel that they did it against the will of most of the board members. And we have, like I said before, we have impact fees that are used to, that can only be used for two things: to pay debt or to build new capacity. You can't use it for buying buses. You can't use it for maintaining a school to add. It's only for building new schools. And we cannot get loans, and we cannot bond out. Do the bond thing, whatever that. Right. And from my perspective, I would think that committees that were from all cities in the county would hold some weight, and they all voted unanimously. But we had, according to the reports, it was in the paper, we know how the paper is, but it said that 2 board members offered what they considered last-minute suggestions to vote no on the recommendation of the school district, and against the Impact Fee Advisory and the local planning authority. They spoke to 2 commissioners. And Mr. Theodore, can you please tell me if you knew that this was coming? Were you aware that the commissioners, that any board members had an issue with this? Pardon me? You were not. So that came as a surprise. The changes to the impact fees have been delayed for 1 year. My issue is that had they delayed it for 3 months, that we could all have discussion on it, I wouldn't have a problem. But delaying it for a year is going to cost the district $500,000. And in a time when we don't have a lot of extra money, in fact, we don't have any extra money, $500,000 is going to make a difference. So what happens now? The schedule for the building, for building a school in West Melbourne will have to be delayed. I don't know what the new schedule would look like, but it certainly can't get there if we don't have the increased fees.
Do they have to wait a year to bring it back?
That's what they said they were doing.
But my understanding, Mr. Beislein, they don't have to wait a year to bring it back, do they?
Well, they can always change the motion that was made to delay it a year if they choose to do so.
Okay.
May I finish?
Yeah, I was just wondering. I'm just getting clarification.
Well, I'm just going by the information I have, and the information that I got from Mr. Theodore last week was that they were delaying for a year.
Okay, I wasn't one of the board members, so I don't know.
Yeah, neither was I. Although, the district can certainly use more portables, but we do that with a cost. Adding portables to schools is a cost. It takes money to move them, to install them, to add water, sewer, electric, sidewalks, and covers for the sidewalks, which are required. It would probably require some redistricting, and then, of course, if you ever built a school, you would redistrict again. And so basically, to those people who called me and wanted to know, the process was in place. I had no idea that after this process has been going on for 6 months, I had heard nothing. I was asked, why didn't I go and fight for it over at the school board? I didn't know that there was an issue. I didn't know. I assumed after 6 months of this and 16 board meetings between March 31st and last week that we could have either had some public discussion, but it wasn't there. So I had no idea, or I would have gone over there and actually given some input on this. So, and to quote you earlier, basically what happened is the squeaky wheel got listened to. So, we were talking about who gets the CTE programs, well, I guess the squeaky wheel does get listened to. My suggestion is this, that, and I think that this probably wouldn't have happened this way had we done things differently. And so my suggestion is that, although I've been on the board for 7 years and have never had this particular issue, I think that this came up because we did it by consensus. And I am thinking that perhaps we need to go with consensus at a workshop and then bring it up again and have a vote on it, up or down, 3-2, whatever, so that they feel comfortable that it was a board decision. Because it's okay to disagree. I have no problem with that. I didn't appreciate not knowing about it. So those are my comments on that for my constituents.
Well, can I?
I'm going to just finish my stuff.
Well, I'm trying to figure out what action you want as a result of that. You asked for something as a result.
I'm just saying that in the future, when we have consensus, we don't take votes at board workshops.
Correct.
And normally when we have consensus at board workshops, superintendent takes direction, right? We give direction based on consensus. And apparently, because this wasn't a board vote, it was okay to do this. I think that if there had been a board vote, that maybe any angst about the 6-month process would have been brought forward to the board to convince us to change the vote. I mean, because I don't know why else it would be done this way. So, and I'm just saying that, to cover ourselves in the future so that when, Mr. Theodore wasted a lot of time, these committees spent a lot of time working very hard trying to come to reasonable decisions to be something that was supposed to be in the best interest of the district and the county. And so I just feel like maybe had it been a vote, it would have been more respected than consensus because it wasn't a real vote.
Okay.
That's,
Okay.
anyway. So,
I will apologize to both Mr. Theodore and Dr. Blackburn. That was a last minute, and I'll explain it in a minute, but one of the things we talked about at our retreat was no surprises, and that disappoints myself that happened that way. We'll explain it in a minute, but it doesn't excuse the fact that I should have alerted Dr. Blackburn of what I thought and still think is a good road for this for all of us to take, and that is first of all, there was no vote, yes or no. There was no up or down, so I'm not quite sure where that came from. That was not in the newspaper, nor was it in anything. So what the commission did was basically just say, hey, we're just going to table this for a few minutes. Now, how long they tabled it for, that's up to them. Mr. Beislein has advised us now that they can bring it back, and I'm sure they can at any time. As I stated earlier today in asking Dr. Blackburn to elevate our facilities plan and our facilities budgeting to a much higher level, this is all part of that. Yes, we had a workshop back in March. Yes, we discussed this. I had very specific questions of both finance and of facilities at that time. They've been on the board items for some time, and every time I've asked finance, it keeps getting pushed off for another month. And I've asked many times. And so there is no surprise, I don't think, either from Mr. Theodore or I know from Ms. Preston, that I have had specific questions about how we came to this, what the other options are, what the return on investment of all those options are, and what discussion we're going to have to make sure that the options that we bring forth to this community using their tax dollars are the right ones for not only the taxpayers, but for obviously eventually the children. And I brought those constantly to them.
What?
Sorry?
Okay, he's got the floor now.
Anyway, those questions have still not been answered. I still have not seen the actual numbers compared to what it would cost to expand schools, what it would cost to add portables, what it would cost to bus, all those things that need to be on the table so that we can make an informed decision. It also has not been brought to the community. And as I've stated many times, we close schools with little to no community impact. We are not. I will not sit here and let us build schools with little to no community impact. And if we take or input, thank you, Andy. If we are going to take more money from our taxpayers, we better have a plan, and a darn good one, to use it. And our superintendent has not weighed in on that plan. I haven't been at a meeting yet where we have discussed that as a group and what his long-term vision is. So yes, as both a taxpayer and as a board member, I reached out to a couple people and asked them, hey, is there any chance that you could just hold off just for a short time so that we can make sure that we have a plan that we can bring to you instead of just asking for money and going, hey, you know what? We think we know what we're going to do with it. We're not quite sure. In the paper, it says we're going to build schools. We've said that really we may or may not build schools. That's not a done deal yet, and that has been noted as well. So yes, I made those requests to them. Whether they acted on them or not, that was totally up to them. I have no, wasn't sitting there asking them or twisting their arm to do so. I think it was the right thing to do. I think that it was a responsible thing to do to let our superintendent weigh in, have a plan that is his own plan, and that he is comfortable with and that the community is comfortable with before we start asking for more money. And just to take money to then put aside, I haven't seen the restricted account built yet in our budget that money was going to go into, and it was coming on January 1st. Certainly wasn't in the forecasted budget for exactly how it was going to be restricted funds. Many of those questions that were asked back in March. So, absolutely, I asked that they delay it. It might be absolutely the right thing to do. I don't know. I don't know what our superintendent believes yet. And this needs to be his plan, not the last superintendent's plan that was discussed at in the last half of a workshop back in March, right before he left, or before he resigned.
I have some concerns about it. I don't know if anybody else has it. You do? Okay, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, last night I was contacted by one of the school board members and requested that we not make a decision on this impact fee yet. And the reason being is they have a new superintendent now, and that the school board hasn't actually approved all of this yet. So I'd like to table this for 90 days. I'd like to make that in a motion.
Okay. That's a motion?
You want to first?
Yeah, I'll let you make that in a minute. Can we probably get staff? Do you want to weigh in on this at all? No? You good? Okay. Yeah. I also had a conversation with two of the school board members who had a concern. I think this thing was probably brought before us as when Mr. Bingley was here, and one of his last things that he wanted to do. I'm not sure that the current board is totally in agreement with this, and I've got some concerns that possibly that this might be cart before the horse before the cart, or something like cart before the horse. Is that what it is? Yeah, one of those, right? So not comfortable with it, and so I'll support your motion. Would you like Commissioner Bettini to weigh in before you do that? And just the only thing I'll say on your motion is that I think it's longer than a 90-day decision. I think it's probably a year out or so. Okay. But Commissioner Bettini.
Okay, then I would support your fixing that motion because I'm not comfortable just going out 90 days. That's silly. And so I would second the motion if you're putting it out 12 months. I would second that. Your motion, if you'd be willing to amend it. Yeah. Okay, then if you'll amend it, then I'll second the motion putting this out for 12 months.
Okay. On it, I believe. Yeah. So we've got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Barfield to table this item for 1 year. And Commissioner Bettini, you willing to second that?
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
As long as it was the 12 months, then I'm seconding it.
I'm very good. Yeah, I think at least 12 months before we need to see
Okay,
that. So,
I'll go for 24.
yeah. So
I mean,
let's, so anyway, we got a motion.
Okay.
It's been
12.
second. Mr. Knox, I see you have a light on.
It's moot now.
Okay. Did you want to weigh in, sir, before we vote? I mean, you're good? Okay. All right. Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay. It's been tabled for at least 12 months.